Hello everyone, hello fourth year. This is our second lecture in your course, Linguistics, and today we're gonna talk about argumentation, argumentative strategies, and implicatures in the light of the relevance theory as we discussed in the previous lecture. Okay. Let me remind you of the basic properties of this theory, relevance theory or RT. Introduced by Sperber and Wilson, the two scientists, linguists and communication scientists, who say that human communication is highly inferential, and that each participant in the communication process has a role to play. The speaker has to provide enough ostensive material and clues to the recipient to understand and help him to or her to understand the message. So there must be ostensive clues, apparent clues, things that can easily it can be easily perceived by the recipients in order to process meaning and figure out the message intended by the speaker or by the addresser. Okay. And here we said also that the theory is based on striking a balance between the effort exerted in order to arrive at the meaning intended by the speaker and the reward, which is gain that we get when we really understand and get the meaning of the text we are tackling. So this will be the reward that we get out of this process in order to make communication successful. So there must be a balance between pains and gains, between cost and gains, between processing effort and meaning attainment. Okay. Also, we talked about, you remember, we talked about the idea or the concept of context and how this term has undergone a lot of changes, starting from just restricting the concept of context to the textual and co-textual correlations and interrelations, cohesion, coherence, and so on within the text, and also talking about the relationship between the text and the participants and the physical or external surroundings. To have something which is really a revolutionary understanding of this term, which is the cognitive understanding or definition of the term context, to refer to the cognitive context and to say that it is everything. Context is not there in the text, is not there in the context, is not there in the surrounding the setting, etc. No, it's there, it's here in our mind, and that context refers to everything that can help us figure out meaning and process the text easily. So all our knowledge, our background knowledge, our world experience, our presuppositions, our assumptions, our values, our ideologies, our our fears, our biases, all these things must be there in order to help us understand whatever comes to our eyes or to our ears, to process the intake in general. Also the mental context, which has to do with all of our cognitive arsenal, and so on. So there is a revolution in the definition of the term context, and this what I think is one of the blessings of the relevance theory and the subsequent theories. This shift has really made it very inevitable to put into consideration all what we have as human and our mental models and our personal experience. So we are not only talking about the producer of the text or the text itself. No, we take into consideration the role of the recipient, the role of the listener, the role of the reader, and so on, in making meaning and in making communication successful. We talked about all these things, okay? Today, also, we talked about political discourse and the characteristics of political discourse, the relationship between language and politics, and so on. Today, we're going to talk about argumentation, and argumentation is based on two important elements. Number one is reasoning, and number two is persuasion. Reasoning has to do with, the claims which we propose must be supported by evidence, by proof, in order to have some logical relationship between them and to be accepted. Claims which are not proved or which are not substantiated will remain claims and will not be acceptable, and so on. And then we have also social aspects, the social aspects which has to do with the addressing audience characteristics, be aware of the audience and the audience needs, and this is a skill in itself, how to persuade audience and how to make change in their attitudes and shift in their paradigms and all these things. So how to tackle the social and psychological aspects, and these are the psychological and social aspects of argumentation. So argumentation is based on two important elements, pillars. Number one, reasoning, to have claims supported by data and evidence and so on. And then persuasion, to take into consideration the audience needs. And then let's go to another point, which is the argument itself, reasoning. We're going to start with reasoning aspect and start with argument. And you know that we have two major. Okay, first, what's an argument? An argument commonly involves premises that are statements or propositions that are put forward and must support a conclusion. And we have two models of argument. One, which is a classical model based on deduction and induction and so on. Deduction. What's meant by deduction? Yeah. Two, as we see here, deductive argument is that where if the premises are true, the conclusion is true. We start from the reasoning moves from the general to the particular. Okay. So the meaning of a statement entails the conclusion. So if you say that all Egyptians are Africans, and then premise number two, Ahmed is Egyptian. So conclusion, Ahmed is is African. Okay. This is number one. You move from reasoning moves from the general to the particular. Second is the inductive argument. It's the other way around. You start with the specific or the particular to the general. Let me give you an example of inductive reasoning. Yeah. Let's see this. Yes, after I ate strawberries, my lips swelled. First time. After I ate strawberries, my lips swelled. Second time. After I ate strawberries, my lips swelled. Third time. So there must be a conclusion. Okay, swollen lips after eating strawberries may be a sign of an allergy. So what's the conclusion? Likely I'm allergic to strawberries. So you start from specific, particular incidents and you arrive at a generalized or conclusion. Okay, let's go back to it. Okay, and then we have other forms which are models that are based on the classical Greek types of arguments, And then in the year 1980s, 1508, we have the British philosopher Tolman, who said that that logicians have gone too far in assuming that an argument should be orderly and of a definitive structure, and so on. He introduced an alternative, and this alternative that says that the well-constructed argument should comprise three components. Number one, the claim or claim. Number two, data. Number three, warrant. What's claim? Claim is something, and he said that this alternative fits. Yeah, actually, it fits real-life arguments. Or arguments that we see in our real life, that we do, that we say, that we, encounter every day in our life. It's not that typical classic form of, arguments as proposed by Greek philosophers and so on. He introduced another type of arguments that fits real life communication. So what are the three components? The three components are: number one, a claim; number two, data; number three, warrant. Of course, there are other elements, but these are the least we can talk about. The first one is claim, and the claim is arguable a statement. It's an opinion. It's it's a statement. It's you can say a conviction, a stance, etc., whatever. And then we have data. Data could be facts, could be statistics, expert testimony. You can prove something to used as proof to substantiate the claim. And then we have the warrant, and the warrant is a link between the two. So if for example, if the data are there and so on, then the claim is okay, and so on. Let's have an example. The bus is the best means of transportation to Cairo. This is a claim, a point of view, an opinion, and data. Why? It's air conditioned. It's more comfortable. You can enjoy your time during the trip. So what's the warrant here? Taking the bus is the right choice if you want to travel enjoyably and comfortably. Or you can say that it is because of these reasons, it's preferable to take the bus to Cairo, and so on. We have other forms of argument. For example, argument from consequences. A leads to B. Argument from cause to effect. A leads to B, and then A is the case. Case here means appropriate. Argument from example. Let's say, for example, in example A1, B is the case or appropriate. In example A2, B is the case or appropriate. Therefore, in cases of A, whatever, A1, A2, A3, A4, etc., B is the case or appropriate. What it applies, B applies to all examples of A. And then we have argument from rule justifies taking a given course of action. So if A is the case, is appropriate, then an evaluation E is justified and conduct C is required. So we are here having different kinds of arguments. We're gonna see in some of them, actually we're gonna see in our analysis of Tony Blair's resignation address later on. And then let's move to another kind of argument called emotional argument. An emotional argumentation is based on the assumption that it's an easier task to touch people's emotion that could lead to persuasion. So they take argumentation the easy way, touching people's emotions, arousing their emotions, swaying them in one way or another. Some people say or believe that this is the easiest way to convince people. Okay. But we have to be cautious here, because the classic enmity or contrast between emotions and reason. This is no longer there, because emotions in the past were believed to distort reason and to lead to irrational decisions and arguments and so on. And that we used to say that in order to think rationally, put your emotions aside and so on. However, latest research in neuroscience has turned this concept and this legacy upside down. And it turned out that we cannot reason without emotions. Wow, we cannot reason without emotions. And some emotions, such as sadness and empathy, are badly needed to make careful and caring decisions. Okay, so, and also they found that people who had undergone complicated brain surgeries to remove certain sick tissues, tumors, and something like that, they were not able to reason or make the decisions, although they still enjoy high Q. And this due to the disconnection between emotions and reasons in their brain, because there are areas for emotions and areas for reason in our brain, and there are neural connections between these areas. So due to these surgeries, neural connections between brain parts were cut, and this turned people's lives into a nightmare, really a nightmare, and their dreams to come back to normal was evaporating. So due to this cut in or disruption in the neural connections between the different parts of the brain, and especially the neural connections between emotions and reason inside our brain, we find that we cannot think. People cannot think. So biologically and neurologically, it's difficult to think without emotions. And we have this is not something new, by the way, because I think that some people have thought about this, but neuroscience has given us some solid evidence about that. This is what we can call new, by the way. So the problem is that emotional arguments are okay as long as they do not turn fallacious. They do not turn into fallacies. So there is no problem at all with emotional arguments, but we must be so cautious, and the red flags must be aired. And we should fly red flags when we feel that people use emotional arguments without paying attention to the logic and the reasoning of the argument. Okay, so let's hear, for example, to Damer, for example, he says that strong emotions distort rational thought. And we have also Pragma dialectal argumentation models. They say that emotional arguments are okay, and they can be used as persuasive strategies, but they could be used. They could turn into fallacious arguments. So we should be cautious about that. Okay, what makes emotional argumentation very pervasive in politics and human discourse in general is that it is easier to construct by arguers. This is on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's easier to process by audience. So it's an easy job for both the speaker and for the audience to make arguments and to process arguments. So both or the two parts of the communication chain feel at ease when it comes to emotional argumentation. Okay, and let's have a look at the major kinds of emotional arguments. We have ad populum argument, which is appeal appealing to patriotism and the loyalty to the country, nation, group, friends, colleagues, etc. And this type of argument is always made swaying people's senses. And ad populum in Latin means to the people, and it emphasizes the need to support claims without questioning, as they are reflecting the in-group bonds. Okay. Let's look at this because this is very important. Ad populum argument could turn fallacious if appeal is made not to group interests but to the position of some influential members of the group in the name of group. So there is no problem with using ad populum arguments, because patriotism and belonging and loyalty to country and to homeland and so on, these are natural feelings and emotions every one of us have. But the problem is that these kinds of or these arguments, ad populum arguments, could be used in order as a cover, to to influence people, and not for the sake of a national cause and national welfare or something like that, but for the sake of the interests of some people rather than the nation or the country itself. Okay. So using the name to do that in the name of the country or the name of the group. Some people benefit, takes privileges from that in the name of people, باسم الشعب, or in the name of the country, and so on. This is what makes us so cautious when we talk about or when we deal with ad populum argument. Otherwise, they are there and they are legitimate. And so on. Second, argument and from fear. Okay, fear is something. It's a strong emotion, and we all experience this. It's something instinct in us. So appealing to fear is okay, but it turns fallacious when it's grounded on baseless fears. When arguments are based on unjustifiable fears not supported by data and so on, just use scary arguments and so on. So there must be this fear must be justified by data. Why do you want to make us afraid of something? Okay. Number C, argument from pity. And pity is also a strong feeling, طبعا, and it appeals to and it taps on people's compassion. Okay, there is no problem with this, but we have to use logic and there is no problem at all with being compassionate and to feel empathy to people. And so on, but this shouldn't blind us of the reality of things and how logical are the arguments put forward to us. The blame folks appeal. The blame folks appeal is a sort of emotional argument in which people in power are strategically portrayed as acting like human, like common people, to look modest, to look, I'm one of you. I am, I'm not someone who is detached from the common people. No, I belong to this community. I am a member like anyone, and and this is something we find when, for example, we find leaders and celebrities and people who aspire to ascend the social and political ladder to, for example, to participate in social events and celebrations, and to put on the national uniform or the national outfit, and so on. So they want to send messages to the people that we belong to you and we are members of this community like you, and we're not different. There are no barriers between us. Okay. Number E, argument by transfer, and he refers to the transference of people's positive feelings towards an idea, an individual, or an object, etc., to another individual, idea, object, etc. So this is used by when, for example, commercial, for example, advertising companies, they hire celebrities to promote certain stuff and certain goods, and they want the fame and the love of the people to this celebrity to be transferred to the advertised good or advertised stuff. Okay. And number F is special pleading argument, and here the arguer is mainly focusing on favorable aspects on the bright side and ignoring equally important, cherry picking, focusing on the favorable aspects and ignoring equally important but less favorable aspects of the argument. Okay, so this is called special pleading argument. Other types we have red herring. It's the arguer here sidetracks the argument by talking off the topic, off the subject, to distract the audience. Okay, whenever they feel, or the arguers feel that they have to distract the audience and they don't have enough convincing and reasonable answers to questions like that, and so on. So they turn to sidetrack audience into and distract them. Self-sufficient arguments which do not need support, and so on. This is the first part of which, so we said that argumentation is based on two important elements. Number one, reasoning, and number two, whatever, emotional reasoning, whatever, non-emotional, illogical, and so on. And then the second social aspect, which is persuasion. And when we talk about persuasion, we must take into consideration the audience needs, and rhetorics must be so relevant to the audience and to address the scope of acceptance, as we're gonna see within this process. Okay. Of course, there are other moves. For example, audience awareness necessitates four kinds of moves. For example, naming moves which guide audience to take a stance. You drive audience to take a stance. Number two, context moves that furnish background information. The addresser feels the addressees need to work out meaning. Okay, so you provide context moves. You put context so as to help recipients process your message the way you like, okay, within the data you provide and the context you provide. Number two, strategy moves that keep audience interest and appeal to their emotions. Okay, don't make them feel strongly about the reasoning section of your argument. And then response moves which may explain the audience possible inquiries and concerns. Okay, so these are the four moves that signal audience awareness on the part of the addresser. Okay, now we're gonna talk about processing. How do audience members process? Let me check first. Yes, it's working. How do audience members process arguments in political discourse, for example. How do they process arguments? How do they understand? How do they receive arguments put forward to them? How? Actually, we first of all we have to talk about three kinds of audience. We have number one, friendly audience. Okay, and the processing strategies will differ from one type of audience to another. So let's talk about first the different kinds of audience. We have friendly audience, we have neutral audience, and we have unfriendly audience. Okay, and we have two kinds of processing, two routes. Number one, processing arguments centrally or central processing, and number two, peripheral processing. Central processing, let's see, yes, yes, central processing, yes, let's first, yes. Audience who are processing peripherally have little processing load. They don't care about the structure of the arguments, to what extent the arguments are logical, the kind of reasoning, whether the speaker is using, how much emotional argumentation does he use or she use. They don't care about this because they friendly audience are supporters of the speaker, so they align with them. They share the same the same ideologies, the same convictions, the same beliefs, the same values, and so on. So there is no clash in ideology or philosophy, or and so on. They are supporters. They don't have to process the speakers or the politician's speech in a central way. They don't have to do that. They accept things the easy way, and this makes them have little processing load. In central processing, on the other hand, or by contrast, and who takes this route, central processing? Actually, the unfriendly audience, the opponents. Most of the time, they don't look at the emotional sides, the persuasive strategies, and all these things. They look at the pros and cons of the arguments. They see the defects of the arguments. They identify the faulty reasoning, and so on. They don't accept and whatever is put to them, especially I'm talking about the unfriendly audience. Whatever is put to them, they will cling most of the case stubbornly to their own beliefs, to their own ideas, to their own convictions, and so on, because they oppose this mass. Very, very difficult to make attitude shift on their part. It's very difficult. So whatever, even if the speaker or the politician says or puts forward very well structured and well reasoned arguments, they are not going to accept them easily, and they will resist all these forms. So we have two kinds of processing. Number one, peripheral processing by lovers and by friends and so on, and central processing by opponents and by hostile and unfriendly audience. Okay. Of course, let's see. Of course, there have been many theories talking about persuasion and the relationship, and how audience tackles this, and what happens in the minds of the audience when they receive these political speeches or political course in general, and so on. And one of them is it's called social judgment theory, which says that in order to secure the acceptance of the audience or taking them to your side, you must provide ideas or messages that are within their scope of acceptance. They could accept and not within the scope of rejections. Okay. Because this will be so difficult for them to accept. Okay, so you must know what are the possible accepted opinions to the audience, and what are the possible rejected opinions possible accepted opinions. Okay, to be in the scope of acceptance, and possible rejected opinions in the scope to lie in the scope of rejection. So this must be taken into consideration. Also, you can provide a set of opinions towards which the respondent is different, and this is called the scope of non-commitment. So these things must be attended to while giving speeches and addressing audience. Okay. Yes, and this explains why friendly and neutral audiences are more easily persuaded than hostile audience, since the persuader's opinions are close to the hostile audience scope of rejection. Okay, the opinions of the speaker and the opinions of the hostile or the unfriendly audience are wide apart, so they cannot come halfway. They cannot reconcile. They are irreconcilable parts. Okay, or ends. The second factor is, which affects also how audience process speeches, is the ego involvement of the respondent. We find that the more involved the respondent, I mean the audience, the higher the possibility his attempt is to critically receive an opinion and even place it within the rejection scope. So if the audience ego is high and they have high ego involvement and so on, they will not accept things easily. They will put speeches under the microscope to check their validity and to check their the degree of acceptability and the reasoning, the sound reasoning in them and so on. So this has to do with the what we call ego involvement of the audience. Okay. We have also other theories talking about audience and how speakers must motivate audience thinking and curiosity and all these things in order to have them always on the track he or she wants them to be on. Okay. Then we move now to another thing, which is persuasion is not influenced by such factors as the communicator's credibility. Is also influenced by such factors as the communicator's credibility. You know, if the speaker enjoys a high degree of credibility, is going to receive, good responses from the audience. Number two, liking of the communicator, if is people love him and so on, or love her. His similarity or her similarity with the receiver, the physical attractiveness of the persuader, language style, order of arguments, implicatures, the types of evidence and claim proposed, a lot of things. His firmness, his energy, commitment, the speaker's firmness, the speaker's modulated voice, non-verbal features, energetic articulation, intense gaze, posture, All these things are very important in convincing and persuading people and attracting audience, and so on. That's why charismatic leaders really they have the audience being attracted to them very easily, due to the power of their character and the energy they have. Now let's look at the political context and what we're gonna see in the speech. We have political context. Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, he became leader of Labour Party in 1994, and then he became the Prime Minister in 1997, and his this Prime Minister stayed in office for 3 terms in a row, and he was really not only a reformer but a transformer, and he transformed Britain and the Labour Party into new Labour Party and New Britain, and he introduced his new doctrine and philosophy, which is called Third Way, in which he walked away in between, midway between Thatcherism and the conservatism and so on, which is based on cutting taxes, reducing social services, stimulating competitiveness and efficiency in the private sector. This is the main ideology of Thatcherism and the conservative party in general. And number 2, the collectivism of the traditional Labour Party, which is based on the idea that the stakeholders' responsibility for economic and social welfare in the broadest term, such as narrowing the gap between the rich and the poor, through public education and national health care. Okay, what he said that he's going to take a way that is called Third Way, instituting a new strategy and a new philosophy in political in the British politics. Then he then came September 11th, and Blair was America's key ally, and then he went to war on Iraq with America and with the rest of the allies, and he sent troops to Iraq. And since then, after the discovery that there were no mass destruction arms or weapons in Iraq, Blair started to lose some of his popularity, even inside his Labour Party, and people start to be or the sense of anger builds up, and he was obliged to leave office, or he chose to leave office in 2007, and he went to his constituency Sagefield in the north east of England, in order to give his resignation speech, attended by his supporters. Okay, this was a very brief background on Tony Blair and the political circumstances that led to his resignation. Okay, we're gonna start analysis, and we're gonna talk about 3 important things here through the analysis. Number 1, the structure of the arguments. So we're gonna take each chunk of or from the speech and investigate it, analyze it in terms of number one, structure of argument, what's the claim, what's the data, or what are the data, and what is the warrant, which one is stated and which one is implicated, and so on. Also, we're gonna talk about the different kinds of arguments. We're gonna see lots of arguments. And number three, how to what extent audience were able to process this and to provide the implicated elements in his argumentation. And we're gonna end with a discussion of the main or the most frequent argument types introduced or employed by player during throughout his speech. And we're gonna talk about relevance, to what extent his arguments were relevant and were really helpful to audience to work out meaning and to get in touch with player. Okay, I'm gonna go through this as quickly as possible, and I leave the rest for you. But let's start with the first part. Okay. Let's start with the first part. Number one, this is the first extract. Okay, I have come back here to Sedgefield, to my constituency, where my political journey began and where it is fitting it should end. This is the first extract of the speech, and as you see, what kind of argument it is. It's ad populum appeal, and it's emotional because, as you see, the man is surrounded by his supporters, by his constituency members, his home, and the emotions are so tense, and this natural to refer to his Sedgefield constituency and say here and Sedgefield and constituency, and look at the hyperbolic style and all these things. Let's look at so what's the first kind of argument here is ad populum appeal. He is appealing to the people, to that, saying that I am one of you, I'm belonging to you, I'm loyal to this place, I started my journey here and I will end my journey here. Okay, so what's the three elements? Okay, ده في كل مرة هنشوف كده. First, claim, and this implicated, and we said that what's said is way less than what's meant. This is human communication. What's said is way less than what's meant. So what we say is so little to what we mean. This is why we use implicatures. Okay, implicated meaning. We say things and we mean a lot of things other than what we said. So we have claim. Player is loyal and grateful to his constituency, and this implicated. He didn't say that, but what did he say? He provided data, and in the light of the data, we construct to him as audience. We cooperate with player and construct the other elements of his argument, the claim and the data. What did he say? He said that he started his career here and is ending it here, and so on. And what does this mean? What does this imply as a claim? He wants to say that I'm loyal and grateful. And what does this mean also as warrant? Choosing Sedgefield as the right place to make his resignation speech is evidence that player is faithful to his constituency. So how does player helps his audience to complete these elements of the of the argument and to construct a well-reasoned argument here is that he's touching people's emotions, and he's giving them some ostensive and apparent pieces of or clues. So relatively, so as far as relevancy is concerned, what is he saying is really relevant because it arouses relevant and significant responses from the audience, especially the friendly audience surrounding him, and they were able to construct and participate in completing the structure of the first argument, which is an ad populum appeal. Okay, we're not going to talk so much about that, but is mobilizing the feeling of people, and this is very interesting, and you will find this in political speeches and political discourse in general. Okay, look at the verbs, look at the language, and the word should and back, began, and the contrast can contrast between began and end, and the poetic effects it creates in the audience who surrender themselves to such catchy oratoric and that make the above certain section really memorable. Okay, second section in second part, still in the beginning of the or the opening section of the speech. He said, I have been Prime Minister of this country for just over 10 years, and this job in the world today, that's long enough for me, but more especially for the country. Sometimes the only way to conquer the pull of power is to set it down. What is what type of argument is this? Also, for the second time, he's using ad populum argument, and it's used in order to stir people's emotions and feelings of patriotism and slogan making. Britain comes first. He reads that although I served the country for 10 years, but I saw that because I love the country more, I step down and leave office because I want to put Britain first. So what are the three elements of claim? Or three elements of argument. Number one, claim, and this implicated didn't say, but we as audience can deduce. Blair loves his country first. Insufficient that he says he steps down after 10 years because he thinks this is in Britain's interest. What is the warrant? Blair's resignation is evidence of his love to the country. Second ad populum argument. Okay, and of course the audience is so friendly and helping him, filling the gaps and meeting halfway with him and cooperating and so on. Okay. And of course the audience cannot do that without having relevant speech, and this proves that Tony Blair's speech, or this part of speech, is really relevant, and it secures the arousing of the intended emotions. Okay. Let's say, but what we can deduce also, what's implicated here is also, I believe in a change. I resign willingly because I felt that would be in Britain's interest. I haven't been pressured to resign. Such implicatures are securely arrived at Blair's supporters because they process the speech peripherally. Remember, they are friends, they are supporters, they don't care about, and they are taken, actually. The audience are taken by Blair's attractive and charismatic character. Okay. And also because being friendly, audience would find Blair's justification of resignation plausible. They even would popularize it in the discussion after the address. As far as neutral audience, they will find Blair's weren't attractive too and would generate similar implicatures to those of the previous groups. As far as opposing audience or unfriendly audience, who process Blair's speech centrally, looking at the pros and cons and the structure and the reasoning and so on, focusing on its reasoning arguments and so on, would detect the defective parts. Of course, يا جماعة, would detect the defective part of his argument and circulate it in their discussion too. Okay. However, we know that, or we see that Tony Blair wants things to be taken emotionally. And he manages to evoke image repair in pictures. Even his opponents find this justification sort of celebrating cherished values, not easily attacked. Okay, so it made it a tough job for his unfriendly audience to oppose what he's saying, at least. Second, or the number 3, extract number 3, it's difficult to know how to make this speech today. This is a judgment to be made on my premiership, and in the end, that is for you, the people, to make. Okay, still in the opening section, and for the third time he's using a Populum Argument, and this leads to having audience completing the different elements of his argument in this section. So the claim is, which is implicated, yani filled by the audience. Blair is democratic and fair. He leaves office, or he leaves people to judge him. He's leaving people to judge him. And what's implicated, the warrant here, is to leave people judge him is the property of a good, fair politician. Okay. As you see, we have a chain of ad populum arguments, which indicates that the man is really using and hitting on the emotional nerve and appealing emotionally to the people. Okay. He wants to say to them, this implicated also, I was an exceptional, reflective, consistent prime minister, so don't be hard judges. Don't judge me the hard way. Okay. And then let's go to another part. I've never quite put it like this before. I was born almost a decade after the Second World War II. I was a young man in the social revolution of 60s and 70s. Of course, in order to give an analysis of any speech or any, whatever text you are writing, you are receiving, you must have enough knowledge. So please check what's meant by social revolution and in the 60s and 70s, because in the 60s and 70s of the 20th century, there was a major shift in the politics in Britain, because many social reforms have been introduced, including having in the field of politics, in the field of education, and so on. For the first time, we have something called comprehensive schools, where students are accepted regardless of their abilities and so on. And this, in contrast with the classic, the old, system of grammar school. Although there is now grammar school are coming back and so on. And there were many political reforms and so on, political and social reforms and so on. He says he's giving his audience such background knowledge in order to help them judge him within this context. In the light of this context, in the light of this circumstances, this political milieu, this social milieu. So if you won't judge me, he wants to say, if you won't judge me, put in mind that I was born in so and so, and I was brought up in such era, and all these things. So judge me in the light of the historical circumstances in which I was born and was brought and I came to office. and leave it. Okay, and this is very important because this part tells us that really player is aware of the audience, and he wants to drive his audience and to steer the audience thinking to a particular end, to a particular destination he wants. And then we have, and what kind of this برضو ما زلنا في populum and so on. And then we have another shift بقى, which is the body of the body of the speech, and he starts talking about yesterday's Britain and today's Britain, and in this case he used argument from comparison. And look at this part, it's a lengthy part, you can read it on your own, but let me take the first one. I looked at our country, a great country, a wonderful history, magnificent tradition, proud of its part, but strangely uncertain of its future, uncertain about the future, almost old-fashioned. You know, he was talking about the era 10 years back when he was, prime minister, and he came to office. It was an age of dichotomy, and people were, torn between two opposing thinking modes, two opposing political doctrines, two opposing economic doctrines, and everything was it was people were two poles apart. You can say two poles apart. It was an age of polarization, and people were at crossroads. They did not know where to head. It was an age of uncertainty, an era of uncertainty that was swaying Britain in general, and of course British politics in particular. So it's talking about this, let's take, I want to explain everything to you and to talk about this, but I think that with this will take so much time. Let's say, for example, talking about families, talking about how people now are here I divided the text into sentences to allow me to put it this way. People are today more open-minded and about race, sexuality, overseas, averse to averse to prejudice, and yet deeply and highly conservative with a small c. Yes, still he wants to say that the British society becomes more open-minded, and people become more open-minded and to a lot of things which were taboos in the past, but still we are clinging to a small C. This C means conservative, values, our established values, our cherished values, such as respecting others and good manners and treating people courteously. These things did not change and will not change because they represent the pillars of the British society and the pillars of any good society. Good manners. So he's talking about this, talking about the change that takes place in the last 10 years during his premiership. Okay, and what kind of argument he used? He used, of course, the argument. نوع كده من argument اسمه argument from comparison, talking about comparison and comparing yesterday's Britain with today's Britain in order to show the degree how he transforms Britain to the wonderful, according to him, to the wonderful present and the promising future. Okay. Okay, you will find ostensibly كلمات بقى كانت باينة قوي برضو were taken as clues. For example, new beginning, sweeping away, all past, wonderful. And also we have glittering words بيسموها الكلمات كده تلمع glittering words such as great, wonderful, magnificent, proud, strangely future, and we have striking opposites such as future, past, old-fashioned, and all these things were, very important rhetorical and stylistic choices that captivate really the audience. Um, yes, and now what are the implicated elements here? Our past is a single glorious thing of which we are proud. This past inspired me. On the other hand, at the time, future was not clear, and that was embodied in the politics of the time. And number three, politicians of time were not, so efficient. His criticizing them, they create a state of dichotomy thinking that reflects two extremes. Okay. He wants to say also that all these are implicated, implicatures. You know, I represent an ideology. It's the I who brings these changes that wipe away all the dirt of the past, and the new ideology that I enhance changes people's political and social vision and endorses values of social justice and the extension of opportunities for all. Okay. برضو بقى كل دي implicated messages I am a phenomenal prime minister. I'm a transformational I didn't only reform, but I transform our homeland and so on. Then it's talking about achievement. When he turns to his achievements, he used another kind of argument called argument from example, and here he is counting some of his achievements. Okay. For example, ask them, go back to 1997, think back. Yes, really think back. It's asking them, pushing them to think back, to make comparison between yesterday and today, between before he came to office and now, and so on. And we're gonna single out some of his achievements, and I ask you to go to Google and to see more about Blair and his achievements nationally and internationally, because this really is not a traditional prime minister. Is phenomenal. He stayed in office for three terms, and really will be a landmark in the history of British politics. Talking about schools, about education, and talking about living standards, and talking about the advancements and promotion he made in the health sector. And then he talked about creating job opportunities and so on. And then also he says that I don't need this is a very important sentence. I don't need a statistic. He says that he wants to say that my achievements we can say you cannot count. Maybe he wants to say something like that. Also he talks about economy and how it is the British economy is at ease with globalization, and how London becomes a financial center and a magnet to investments and so on. And then he talked about culture of Britain and how it is thriving. And then he talked also about his about the British role outside, globally, especially in Africa, ending poverty and also talking about the British role and in combating climate change and the fight against terrorism and so on. English, he's saying that Britain is not a follower, it's a leader. Okay, he wants to say that I'm not a follower, I'm a leader, and because Britain is not a follower, I'm not a follower, because he wants to put away all the accusations that were addressed to him that he is a follower to the American president. Okay, thank you. See you next time. I'm gonna talk about the rest of the speech. Thank you.